everyone, welcome to my channel. Today's video aims to support your contextual knowledge for the play Othello. Making sure that you include contextual details throughout your essays is really very important. Often students do things like make comments such as all Elizabethan women felt like this, or all Jacobean men felt like that, or did that. And unfortunately they end up selling themselves short because the generalizations are rash and, if I'm really honest, sloppy. We want to make sure that your contextual details throughout your essays are detailed, specific and thorough. Not only that, you want to make sure there's a smattering throughout your whole essay, not just in parts. Remember, you're not writing a history essay though, so we don't want a chunky paragraph about context. You're using the contextual detail to aid your analysis, to further your argument. You're not using it just to show off to the examiner that you know that Shakespeare was born in Stratford-upon-Avon. You want to make sure that you're using detailed knowledge of Jacobean or Elizabethan times to show off your understanding, your deeper understanding of the play, Shakespeare's intentions potentially, and of course the impact on the audience. So today's video should help you in doing that. Now today we're having a look at Thomas Coryat and the Venetian Courtesans, which is significant to Othello, and as I go through you will discover why.
So the question remains, who was Thomas Coryat?
Thomas Coryat was an English writer. He is mostly known for writing two books detailing his wanderings through Europe, Africa and the Near East. He was known to be a little eccentric. One of my favourite parts is when he details the platform shoes that the Venetian women used to wear in Renaissance Venice. He was employed by Prince Henry, who was James I's son, and he was employed as a type of court jester actually from 1603 to 1607. In 1608 he began his grand tour of Europe and wrote down his experiences in a memoir called Coryat's Crudities, hastily gobbled up in 5 months' travel in France, Italy, etc. Now, some of you smarty pants are probably thinking, how does this relate to Othello? Othello was performed in 1603 and Coryat did not begin his tour until 1608, and I believe his book was published in 1611. What's important though is that we look at how Shakespeare's contemporaries viewed Venice and the courtesans that operated within it. Coryat's description of the Venetian courtesans shows why it is so easy for Iago to undermine Othello and Othello's trust in Desdemona. And it also highlights how Shakespeare's audience, with their knowledge of Venice, the Venetian courtesans, and their prejudices against Venice, would understand the subtext behind Othello's insecurities. Now, Coryat seemed to be equally fascinated, stunned, seduced, and repulsed by the courtesans he met in Venice. He came from a relatively conservative country. Remember, women weren't even allowed on the stage in the UK, in England, but in Venice there were female actresses on the stage. So he found Venice to be quite an alien culture. According to Coryat, Venice was home to around 20,000 working courtesans. This would mean approximately 1 in 4 women worked in this field. In fact, travellers who visited Venice in the 15th, the 16th and the 17th centuries always marvelled at the number of courtesans in the city, which would be why the city's notoriety would have been part of British public knowledge by the time Othello was performed. The practice was legal in Renaissance Venice, and the taxes from the trade helped the city to expand both physically and politically. It created a lot of wealth for the city. Some Venetian courtesans became incredibly wealthy. Some became champions of the arts. They compiled poetry, collected art, tapestries. They wrote poetry themselves. And if you're really interested in this, you can have a look at a lecture by Crescinda Henry called The Venetian Courtesan as Collector, Host and Entertainer here on YouTube, and I will link it below. Many Venetians, of course, complained that the courtesans dressed better than noblewomen. Travellers on occasion thought the courtesans were the ordinary women of Venice, which was, a bit of a problem.
The citizens of Venice were quite conservative, and the women of the middle classes and the nobility were not often seen in public. Coryat says that men coop up their wives always within the walls of their houses for fear, and that one would seldom see a Venetian gentleman's wife. This makes some interesting links to Jessica from The Merchant of Venice and Desdemona in Othello, with both women running away from their homes, which may have felt like prisons, to get married. In terms of Desdemona, we meet a woman who has lived quite a sheltered life, becoming besotted by the stories and adventures of a war hero who was routinely invited into the family home to regale her father of his travels and tribulations. Surely the opportunity for freedom through marrying this adventurous outsider, who potentially would not expect a cloistered existence from her, as he's not a Venetian, was too good to pass up. But that's maybe just one of my many theories.
Coryat definitely seemed to be a little disappointed when visiting Venice, saying that it is a shame that a city so potent, so renowned, should allow such an ungodly thing to be legal and tolerated there. He was so stunned that he felt that the Venetians should, and I quote, and I will actually read this, should daily afraid lest their winking at such uncleanness should be an occasion to draw upon them God's curses and vengeance from heaven, and to consume their city with fire and brimstone, as in time past he did Sodom and Gomorrah. Through Coryat's reaction to the courtesans of Venice and wider society, we can imagine how the English public may have felt towards Venice and the courtesans as well. Saying all this though, Coryat does try to explain the Venetian rationale of legalising courtesans, and it was apparently to protect the chastity of their wives. So the husbands, of course, don't need to become Capricorned, aka cuckolded, which, of all the indignities, and this is what Coryat said, with all the indignities of the world, the Venetian cannot patiently endure. The fear of being cuckolded, of course, is one of the main fears expressed by men through Shakespeare's plays, and can also be found actually throughout English literature as a whole. I mean, you can go back and even have a look at Chaucer, for instance. We'll discuss this, of course, in more detail when we look at masculinity during the Elizabethan times.
So, how do we incorporate this information into our essays? You want to make sure that you are including detailed, specific, relevant AO3 into those essays. There is no point just adding random details about Jacobean life, how many pinafores a person wore, or anything like that. It's also not fair to say all women felt this way or all women were like this. Remember, we're aiming for very specific, detailed bits of information, contextual information that can be used to expand and highlight your analysis and your understanding of the play as a whole. So here are some little things to start you off. You could discuss the tolerance and legality of the courtesan trade in Renaissance Venice and link it to contemporary male insecurities about being cuckolded. This is really significant, of course, not just because we have Othello, who, his insecurities with his wife lead to her murder, but actually we have somebody like Iago, who also accuses his wife and does believe that his wife has cuckolded him. So this is clearly a real worry for the Renaissance man, and so that's something that you could definitely consider, especially in light of the legality of the courtesan trade. Not only that, you could maybe consider Iago. Iago calls Desdemona a super subtle Venetian and tells Othello, "I know our country's disposition well. In Venice they do let God see the pranks they dare not show their husbands." Othello recognizes in his outsider status that Iago apparently knows Venice better than he does. Iago understands the mindset of Venice better than he does. Iago apparently understands the women better than he does. And Othello, trusting Iago, believes what he says to him because he recognizes that he himself is this outsider. He doesn't have that understanding that Iago does. Not only that, you can then go on to link it to Othello's accusation when he calls Desdemona an impudent strumpet. He also calls her some more vulgar terms, but I'll let you come across those yourselves. You could also make a link, of course, to Desdemona running away from home. She defies the norms. And marrying Othello doesn't seem like the behaviour of a chaste, noble girl, but instead a rebellious and lascivious woman. Remember, she defies the norms, the cultures, the practices of the time. Especially for a woman of her standing, she defies and disobeys her father. And even at the beginning, when she is confronted by the senator himself, is it the senator? Whoever it is himself, she defends her perspective and her marriage to Othello, even in the face of her father. She does so really well.
Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed it, and I do hope you'll come back and actually include this stuff into your essays. I promise it's going to really enrich your understanding of Othello as a character, but also the play as a whole, and definitely Iago too, because he's a bit crazy. Please subscribe, please like, ring the dingly dangly bell, or just press on it so that you get notifications. See you next week.